Hey everybody, Gregg Bendian here at the ProgCast. And as always, we are speaking with some of the most interesting and creative musicians on the planet. And today is such a case. I'm joined by a younger musician, we'll say, but he's certainly been around playing as a composer, keyboardist, sound designer with people like Louis Cole and Genevieve Artadi, Pedro Martins, Nate Wood, THUNDERCAT. You might have seen him in the Pat Metheny Side-Eye Trio, and he's currently at work playing drums for Mac DeMarco. So my guest is quite a multi-hyphenated individual. I'm happy to welcome Chris Fishman. Hi, Chris.
How's it going? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, it's so cool. You're into so many cool different musical areas, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I know that when you started off, you were really kind of splitting your time between drums and piano. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of playing both equally um at this school in Inglewood, California. I was really grateful to do at a young age. And yeah, I was playing drums and piano and kind of just doing both, and it was a good environment for someone at a young age to be playing.
What kind of stuff was catching your ear around that time? What was listening like for you?
Um I think for me, it was like my mom was playing a lot of like David Bowie and Stevie Wonder and Prince, um, stuff like that around the house. My dad also liked Weather Report and sort of fusion stuff, and having that around, just listening, and a lot of Zeppelin too, actually. But just having a lot of like different music and just kind of injecting it in my brain and not really even being aware of like why I like it, and just kind of liking it. That was probably the best education, and just kind of hearing that. Um, but also this particular program, it was called Just Loving Music Studios. They had an incredible church band. It was at this church called First Church of God, and so it was really heavy in the gospel music scene. So that was also really great. Um, yeah, that was probably like the first like live music I ever got to hear. So it was really cool.
So, what drummers were you into when you started out drumming?
Oh man, definitely John Bonham. Um, a lot of local drummers around here that were definitely really inspiring to watch, and just going to see like concerts. I remember like one of my first shows was to see Prince, and my mom took me at the Staples Center, and I forget who was playing. I forget who was playing drums in that band. This was probably like 2005 or six. So it might have been the musicology tour, but yeah, that was also just like super heavy for me because I didn't really see like a band like that yet. Um, but yeah, I was listening to like just all the records. I guess Stevie Wonder would be in there too because his way of playing drums is really particular. Uh, um, but yeah, some of those, you know,
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that on things like Living for the City, that's
yeah,
Stevie on everything,
yeah,
including the
yeah,
female vocals up top.
right.
Yeah.
He has such a cool way of playing drums. It's so particular. I love it. It's
Hmm.
really really cool.
And his drum solos are legendary.
Oh yeah, yep, yeah. Stevie's the best. Stevie's the best.
Yeah, I got to see the Songs in the Key of Life tour when he
Okay.
came around recently doing the whole album with the bonus tracks.
Oh
And,
wow.
killer band, like 20 cycles of Isn't She Lovely on harmonica, just going, going, going. And
Yeah.
just so spontaneous, so incredible. All the vocal stuff, like he was singing it for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. When was that?
I'd say it was probably within the last 7 years or so,
Okay.
Madison Square Garden. And it was just the only time I've ever seen him live, and I couldn't believe his vocal range still there,
Yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
you know. Um, it's funny, this story was told to me, I think by Dennis Chambers, but Stevie, when he shows up to gigs, he likes to sit in. He's very into sitting in. And he always asks, can we play giant steps? Yeah,
Wow.
sit in with my band. We're gonna do giant steps, Stevie. Okay. All right.
Oh my.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to see Stevie for the first time actually in December of 2022. And it was one of the first shows he had played in a really long time. And he had a vocal or no, he had I think it was a kidney transplant or something. He had a major surgery happen and he had to get like vocal training for a long time to you know, calibrate his vocals and stuff. And yeah, it was one of the coolest shows I've ever seen. He did like 3 hours and it was at the Nokia Theater. And that was really special. He did like everything. Like he just played and he sounded like he was 25, like
Hmm.
still saying like better than ever. It was incredible. Yeah, that was really, really special.
Yeah, his energy is just always.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious, you studied at Manhattan School with Stefan Harris, and as a tune percussionist myself, I'm very, very much a fan of his work. And I was kind of wondering, like in general, what your time at Manhattan School was like.
Yeah. For me, so Stefan came in the last 2 years I was there, and he was the dean of the school. Um, and then before that was Justin DeChocho. Um, I would say for me, it was just like the best time to be in New York. And it was that little like last period of before COVID. I was there pretty much for the last like 2015 to 2020. So it was just like this real sweet spot where it was like still really energetic and a lot of places that unfortunately shut down were still open there. Jazz Standard and 55 Bar. Uh, and then yeah, I was going regularly to see stuff, and I feel like my education was really like seeing shows like a lot. Because that wasn't really a thing in LA other than the Blue Whale.
Hmm.
And I think that was just like the best education. But MSM was great because it also just had an incredible group of musicians like that I was attending with, and that was that was awesome for me. Daryl Johns was one of those people I went to school with, and it was a good time to just workshop our music and record together and yeah, it was a good time. We had 24-hour practice rooms, so we could like pretty much just play all night, which is what we did. So yeah.
That's awesome. So how did you end up working with people like Lewis and Genevieve and that
Yeah.
whole wing of things?
So it's funny. I actually met Lewis and Genevieve a really long time ago. I might have been like 12 or 13. I was studying with a dear friend of Lewis's. His name is Richard Sears, and great piano player. And they went to school together. And my older brother, who actually plays upright, his main thing is neuroscience. Though he went to school for research, neuroscience research, but he was at USC. I think for a year they crossed over. So that's how I met Richard, and then Richard introduced me to Lewis and Genevieve, and I think I saw Lewis the first time at this like yoga studio, and he was playing in his band Rick with my teacher at the time, and I had like never heard anybody play drums like that before. And yeah, they were just so Lewis and Genevieve were there, and they were so sweet to me. Um and I also used to go, they used to have some parties in LA, and I would kind of just hop along as a kid and just go. And yeah, it was really cool. And then I didn't see them for a while, and then we kind of met up again in like 2015, I want to say. And then yeah, we started playing. I started playing first with Genevieve, and I was working on a record that she was recording with me. Um, and then Lewis started to ask me to play with him right when COVID was sort of like being like, all right, we could try like masks, like shows with masks.
Masks. Yeah.
So we did, actually, I want to say it was like one of the first shows in New York that like they allowed. It was like the day they were like, all right, we'll try a show where we have like a select group of people that can attend with masks, and they have to be vaccinated. So we did a show, and it was me, Nate Wood, and Lewis at New Blue. We did a few nights, and that was like so powerful because none of us played a gig since 2000, early 2020. So that was like pretty much a year and a half of no concerts. And that was really, really powerful to do that, and really fun. And Lewis had some new music that he was sort of workshopping. And then we went back and did more shows after that, and we went to Europe and stuff. And so it kind of kicked off after. But yeah,
Well,
that was a
that's an
cool
interesting
moment.
grouping. You, Lewis, and Nate Wood, and do you guys all switch off on instruments?
Yeah. Well, Nate and Lewis more specifically, they really could switch off because Nate is like, yeah, Nate's an incredible like he plays everything at the highest level. And he's yeah, he would play bass, and then also Lewis would play key bass, and then Nate would play drums, or then Lewis would play drums. And yeah, it was really fun. And we still do that. Band, we did a little tour earlier this year, and yeah, that was awesome because it's just like the best my two favorite musicians like ever, and they're just like a good hang. And Genevieve would also was playing with us, so we would do some like knower stuff.
Mm.
um this tour we did earlier was Genevieve would open with her set, so I was playing drums with her for the opening set, and it was Chiquita Magic also.
Hmm.
And then we would do Lewis's set, which was me, Nate, and Lewis, and then Genevieve would join at the end and do some newer songs. So that was really fun, really, really fun.
Yeah, it's such an interesting nexus of players and interests. When I
Yeah,
look at that SoCal scene and what you guys have been doing, and THUNDERCAT and Lotus
yeah,
and Kamasi, like there's just, and Miguel, and there's just so many interesting musicians bringing their own hybrid.
Yeah.
right? I mean, isn't that what it
Totally.
is? Aren't you? I would think listening to your music that you're into everybody. I mean, it seems
Oh,
like Wayne Shorter would be a big guy for you.
very much. Yeah, I think that's the beauty in LA is there's very much a open sort of very open scene to everyone's interests of different music and sort of combining it. And it's like everyone's an improviser, but it doesn't have to be jazz, it could be jazz adjacent or jazz influence and then combined with all this stuff and kind of forces a new scene to um, become a thing here in LA. That's why I think LA is really exciting right now. A lot of different things happening, music that I can't really even describe what it is, but it's really cool. Definitely felt that about Nowhere when I first heard Nowhere. I was like, okay, I've never heard anything like this before, and it was so fresh, and it still is. Um, but yeah, LA's happening
The
right
new
now.
Nowhere album is really incredible.
Yeah.
People, if you haven't heard Nowhere, Knower, that's definitely something you want to check out. And it's a melding of many different styles, and some people might call it a Michael Jackson meets anime meets electronica.
Yeah, there's so much in there.
Yeah. Did you ever get to see Zawinul?
No,
No.
sad. No. Yeah, that would have been awesome. I think he died in 2005 or six, something like that.
Hmm.
That would have been like 9 or 10. So yeah, that
Yeah.
never happened. But
It's
I'm biggest fan. So
Well, it's cool that that you came up with Weather Report because I feel like it's essential ingredients
oh
to
yeah.
anybody that's going to play keyboards, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, that I would say that music kind of started in a whole thing, like just I don't know. I even now I hear Weather Report and I'm like, there's just so many bands and so much music influenced by that. It's like it's crazy.
And I've been going back and finding all these live recordings, which for some reason are ending up on Spotify. And I became obsessed with the final band, um, and this tune, Blue Sound Note 3, that's on Domino Theory.
Oh,
And
cool.
it's such an incredible composition. Yeah, I think it's a Joe. And it's different every time, you listen to it and all the different versions, and every time they just change things around or take longer, get quieter. It's just so live. And I'm lucky enough to have seen them even back in the day with Jocko, before Jocko was even Jocko. And
Mhm.
it really was, that was exactly what you say. Like that was a clinic, that was a learning experience to see, oh, they're going to wait, they're going to lurk,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
then something will happen, but maybe it won't, That was just witnessing that. I think I saw them 3 or 4 times, but then of course Alamo Syndicate, just the cutting edge vibe.
Yeah.
Like they don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. We're all experiencing this moment together,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I wish I saw Weather Report live. That would have been
Well, you can see all the footage on YouTube, and it
yeah,
just bears out everything that we love about them, because they were so spontaneous, yet it's in the writing, then there's a tremendous amount of composing.
totally. I think it also listening to them now and specifically Joe and his role in that band, he was sort of like a vocalist and the way he soloed too, it's really specific how he improvised in that band, specifically that band. And I feel like that's something like I still listen to. I'm like, okay, this is not like he's just taking a solo, like he's really like playing like another melody of, it's like its own thing that yeah, I can't really describe it well, but it's just like it's so vocal. It just sounds like he's singing, which is something I always wanted to be able to do. I unfortunately can't sing to save my life, but like synthesizers pretty much allows that to a degree, being a piano player and like not being able to have, you know, sing the notes and like, get certain dynamics and legato and all this stuff and vibrato. And so I think the synthesizer allows that, which is cool. And Joe kind of started that. He was like the first guy to really do that. Yeah, powerful.
It's funny because Nowhere came around recently, and Lewis said to the audience, I used to pack groceries at
Oh yeah,
where was it?
at Ralph's.
At Ralph's.
Yeah,
And
and
I
now,
packed Joe Zawinul's groceries.
yeah,
Now, do
yeah,
you respect me?
yeah,
And my
yeah,
son and I think we're like the only two people that got the reference in this
yeah.
place. But
That's
it brings something up, which is like between all the people that we're talking about and your collaborators, you guys all listen to the same stuff, right? I mean, everybody's into Wayne, obviously. Everybody's into Chick. Everybody's into what? You tell me. What are you? Because
yeah,
Pedro's coming from the Brazilian thing, but he's clearly into Holdsworth.
right. I think, well, for me, I'm also like we're always hanging out with each other, and I'm always like getting new music to check out and like, oh, what's this? Um, Pedro got me into Tonino Horta's first record, and it wasn't on Spot. It's still not on Spotify. It's on YouTube only. So like, we'll just share stuff. Lewis got me into this Skrillex stuff that I always kind of ignore. I was like, Skrillex, that was weird. And then I kind of now I really see the connection of like,
Mm,
you know, how deep it is and like what he took from that. Um, yeah, everybody has their stuff they check out, and so and some stuff I'm like, I don't get this, and then I'll get it like a year later, maybe.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, it's cool. It's not really any specific type of music too. Just
Right.
um but yeah, it's like we're all kind of still in school. That's what I love about it here. We're all kind of
May it always be so.
yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, there's so much to discover musically. There's so many holes
Yeah.
that I didn't go down that that I need to,
Mhm.
so it's endless. But it's so great that in a world where there's a million cover bands that they're vital new composers like you out there working, keeping the tradition going of, I don't know, harmonic beauty. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's cool.
Melodic works, interesting rhythm. All of these things come together in our creativity, and you can't even really parse it out necessarily.
Yeah.
Um, but Chris, I wanted to ask you about a common collaborator that we have in Pat Metheny. I
Mm.
years ago did a triple album improv thing with him called The Sign of Four. Me, Pat, Derek Bailey, and Paul Wertico. And obviously just an incredible experience to work with him, to be around him, to see kind of how he thinks about music, how he lives the music. You had quite a handful or two handfuls of work to do with that music, because we're talking about Side Eye Trio, and that's keyboards, Pat on guitars, and drums.
Yeah.
So you're maxing out all the time, right?
Yeah, it's definitely the first time I played that many keyboards ever. And I'm also playing bass for a huge portion of the show. So it's like kind of a big multitasking environment that I was not not very used to.
How did
But
you come to work with Pat?
um, so Pat saw a show that I played in, I think it was 2017 with Dana Stevens, one of my good friends and favorite saxophonists, and he's amazing. And we did this show. It was with him and Savannah Harris, awesome, amazing drummer, who I was going to MSM with at the time. It was trio, and we played a lot of Dana's music. And I think in that particular gig, I had to play some bass stuff, left-hand bass stuff. And Dana played upright bass and switched to sax. It was this like kind of moving trio thing. And we played this show at Cornelia Street Cafe, which is not around anymore in New York. But that night, I believe there was like a storm. It was like a weird sort of flooding New York situation, and no one really came to see this show except for like a few people. And it was like my brother and his wife, and then some other people there. And then um, I guess Pat came to that show to check it out. He wanted to hear me play in that context. I didn't know he was there. And then basically like a few months later, I got an email and he asked me to come over and play with him. And I was like, oh, wow, cool. And then we started kind of regularly getting together. And yeah, it was awesome just kind of building a sound and yeah, that in itself felt like school and still does now. But it was like it was really awesome to just get together with him and and play tunes. We just would play tunes like standards and talk and then play more. And then COVID hit, and then we had like a little gap of not playing. But then I started coming back in like 2021. So we kind of continuously we were playing for quite a few years just at his house and like recording and stuff like that. Um, and then he asked me to join Side Eye in early 2022. So yeah, it's been awesome.
And it's so interesting too because you know, Pat's a big Bill Evans guy.
Mm.
And I wondered if that was maybe one of the levels that you guys connected on.
You know what? Actually, we never talked about Bill Evans. Um,
Wow.
funny enough, but I'm trying to think the first person like we really talk. I mean, Charlie Hayden,
Sure.
of course, one of his dear friends. Paul Bley, um, Ornette, those kind of guys. Keith, but yeah, we never talked about Bill Evans. Actually, funny enough,
Were you aware of Lyle Mays' work with Pat?
definitely. I that's kind of a sound I also grew up listening to. More the Pat Metheny group with Pedro Aznar singing and Lyle. Yeah, that sound is very sort of embedded in my brain forever. Rest in peace, Lyle Mays. But yeah, that he's definitely a big influence for me, and also along with I would say Joe Zawinul really revolutionized synthesizers and in music that you know he sort of was a huge component to like that new scene of music, which I don't know what people even call it, because it's like Weather Report kind of goes along that wave too. It's still different, but like, sort of pop jazz, or like the writing having real, like, sweet pop melodies
Hmm.
with, harmony that was a little more, uh going more places than normal. But yeah, Lyle was a huge influence for me, and still to this day I'm checking out a lot of stuff. I checked out his first solo album again, and just like, man,
Slink,
yeah, Slink. That's a
Slink.
really good record. Really, really good record.
We were just listening to it here the other day. Can't get over it still.
It's so good.
How do you get that many things to go on together at the same time and fit and not get in
Yeah,
each other's way?
right, right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, he's such a vital element too of that Pat Metheny group sound. And I mean, you could just hear when it's Lyle like in 2 milliseconds, and that's the that's amazing. I would say, like, for me, I was like Lyle, Joe Zawinul, and Jan Hammer for like synthesizers. Those are the three guys that like changed the game. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I worked with Jan Hammer briefly. He hired my Mahavishnu ensemble to be his band at Moogfest in '06.
Oh,
I
cool.
don't think enough people talk about, not enough keyboard players talk about him, but classical guy from Czech and organ player,
Yeah,
ridiculous left hand, beautiful composer with very unusual modal ideas.
yeah.
So that's very cool to hear a youngin bring up Jan because
Oh man,
Jan is major.
he's the best. Yeah, I the first time I ever, or first record I ever heard was Elvin Jones.
Mm.
Until this day, that's also some of my favorite, like, keyboard stuff, I guess you would say. It's just so,
Dee da da da
yeah,
dee, da 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 dee, da da dee da.
yeah, man, that record is amazing.
It is
Um,
amazing.
yeah, shout out Jan Hammer.
Yeah. Still hoping we'll have a talk with Jan on this program someday. Just saying.
Yeah,
Jan, please don't hide out. We all love you. Uh but yeah, the Lyle Mays thing is heavy because I don't think a lot of people realize what you said, the contribution, the collaboration, that relationship between Pat and Lyle.
mm,
And I might as well tell this story now because just been thinking about Lyle a lot. And when we were working on the Sign of Four, Pat was working on Imaginary Day, and they were writing the material for Imaginary Day. And I got a glimpse into how Pat and Lyle collaborated because Pat had a whiteboard in his studio where he had ideas listed for the songs on the album. And there's one in particular that people might know called Follow Me, which the melody is played all on guitar harmonics. Boo-dee-da-dum, dee-dum-dum. And and I said, so how did you guys write that? And Pat said, oh, I sent Lyle boo-dee-da-dum, and he did everything else, just jumping off from that one motif.
whoa, that's crazy.
And that really was like a Strayhorn Ellington thing too,
Mm,
where they could finish each other's sentences, they could finish each other's ideas, and
yeah,
man, yeah, underrated.
I wish I got to meet Lyle or even hear him. I never saw him play, and never met him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
another thing about him that sort of connects you to him, which I find interesting, is Lyle always struck me as a guy who was like, piano is my instrument.
Mm,
And through the piano, other things will happen because when I saw PMG, one of many all times, he had MIDI piano,
yeah, which no one really did that.
right? He had a laptop, he had the Obi, and he had like maybe one other thing, and it was all basically running through the piano.
Yeah. I mean, that's the really cool thing too, just working with Pat is he's so forward thinking about the technology of stuff. And of course, the Orchestrion project is one of those. And we incorporate that in the show. And I mean, I'm still like, what the hell? This is crazy. Like the stuff he has on stage, but specifically the MIDI portion of the thing you're talking about with Lyle, which I think he used the Moog bar, the Moog piano bar. I believe that's what it was that basically allowed the piano to have MIDI send to any, synth he was using. And I'm actually trying to get into that. It's so hard to find one of those right now. I've been looking for like months. Um, but yeah, it's no, like that was never really heard before, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I remember the advent of starting to see laptops appear on stage, and Lyle was probably the first guy.
Yeah.
Like before I saw Fripp and King Crimson using laptops playing, guitarists playing through laptops, I saw Lyle running his whole rig through a laptop.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I feel like though that time where they would bring just so much gear. I mean, I never got to be around for that time, but I will say, not to bring the analog digital conversation up too much here, but I like, just as someone who's a fan of the music, I really love hearing the Oberheim four voice and like that whole, setup of all the big synths that Lyle used. And there's definitely nothing like that. Unfortunately, it's a real drag to tour with stuff like that now, and I'm sure it was then. And bringing the computers in is awesome for that reason. But there's nothing that sounds like it to me. Like
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, like
actual,
you can have plugins for Mellotron, but is it
yeah.
exactly the same experience listening wise? Maybe not.
Live, I could say it's a little different because playing these big halls and stuff, you could kind of get away with the reverb of the room, and it kind of eats the certain details that you would hear in a recording. So the computers work, but you know, yeah, the in specifically in recordings, I would say it's just like I could hear it pretty well that it's like, oh, that's whatever, a keyscape or something that's
Mhm.
not um real. But yeah, that's just my thing. Um yeah, seeing that first four voice, which I'm sure there's like only a few left, as this very rare instrument, is pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff.
Vintage keys.
Yeah.
That's a whole like Bach on original instruments.
Yeah.
Till you really want to go there? I don't know. What is gained, what is lost?
Yeah. Well, the fact I could bring everything on my computer now is pretty cool. Although I will say, like for the gig with Pat, I'm not really, I mean, you still can't take away the physical element of certain things. So it's like the organ's still going to weigh pretty heavy that we play. We have a Hammond B3 on the road. It's digital but it has the Leslie, but all that stuff is still, a lot of gear. I have a Prophet 6 too, and two Hydrosynths and a Moog one. The Moog one is really heavy. Um, and like a Nord for road stuff. So there's still a lot of like heavy instruments. Um, and that Moog one is really fun. There's nothing like that one. Um, But yeah, I don't think we'll ever get to a point where it's like everything's just super, you can't really defeat the laws of physics, because it's like the weight is needed for the sake of having certain action and all that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm a huge fan of the real organ,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah.
from the Jimmy Smith stuff to the Jan Hammer stuff to the Olivier Messiaen stuff, you know.
Hmm.
I love the instrument.
Yeah.
It's just it's like an orchestra. It's incredible.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I never really got to play organ much until this gig. Um, and I told Pat, I was like, you know, technically it was the first instrument I played because of the school I was going to when I was 4. It was like they had an organ there, and I used to play with it,
Hmm.
but I couldn't reach the pedal, so I never really understood how to properly use it. So that was a learning curve for me. But I love organ. It's so fun, and it's like, yeah, it's a different part of the brain using the volume pedal, and really get it's like a synth that doesn't have presets, and you're pretty much just, you know, breathing with these knobs, and you're using your ears to get different tones. And yeah, I love it. That's a very vocal instrument too. um but yeah, it was a challenge in the beginning, kind of learning that how to use the organ, and because it's a pretty vital element to this gig, and it's pretty much an organ trio that kind of expands on other instruments. But
Right. So there's a foundational concept that this is an organ trio
right.
plus.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say it's coming from that tradition of the organ trio, you know. um yeah, so
It's
it's
like
cool.
the only grouping Pat hasn't done, you know. So he finally did an organ trio record or bassless trio,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, and I love it because I love, I feel like the bass, I mean, unfortunately I can't play guitar or bass. It just doesn't work for me, because I don't know, just trying it, like my hands don't want to do this. I have to kind of just, it's like drums is down, piano is down.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't,
right. Right.
can't really angle my hands that way. My brain doesn't work like that. But
Huh.
I do feel like I've always like wanted to be a bass player, because that's pretty much my favorite instrument. And it's cool to really, you know, get to do that. And there's a lot of control you have, you know, when you're playing the role of the bass. And
Well, it's functional, but it's also melodic because there's really nothing else down there.
yeah.
And then I also think about who are two of my favorite bass players, Stevie Wonder and Jan Hammer, you know,
Mhm. There you go. Yeah,
right?
Stevie.
Moog bass, baby.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's fun. It's fun for me. I still do want to like really get some time to learn bass one of these days. Um, but yeah, my hands just don't want to do the fretboard thing. It just doesn't feel natural to me. But especially preparing for this gig, I was listening to a lot of bass players, and kind of had to learn how to separate my brain from being paying attention to what my hands were doing too much, because if I do that I get out of focus. Because you know, you kind of have to let your hand take care of that, and then your other hand do this, and if you think about one or the other, then you kind of get out of place.
Hmm.
So I was practicing with a lot of records, and just sort of trying to yeah, make it so I'm not thinking about it anymore. And that took a while. I still think I'm, you know, figuring that out, but um, it's a good challenge. It's really fun.
I mean, similar to drumming, right?
Yeah, It is similar to drum. Yeah, I mean, I think the difference is like it's sort of like the role of the bass is still, I don't know, it involves a little bit more of like, I got to be real careful what I'm playing here because this part of the song needs to get to this dynamic, and you know there's some real detailed moments, and it's and I have volume pedals for everything, so I'm like using them sort of throughout the show. I don't know, it's a different part of the brain for me. I asked Nate about this, Nate Wood, who's pretty much the guy that I say for this exact example, which is just like he can really split his brain and play multiple instruments at the same time, but not in a magic show way, in a
No.
musical way. And that's so cool to me. And watching him do it, and he does it in this show with Lewis, is it's really cool because he can. That's the other thing too, is like if you're the bass player and you're soloing with your right hand, it's you got to be able to think about like playing, against the time and behind the beat, all over, just like you would with someone else playing bass. So that really involves like kind of splitting your brain up so that you're not like going with yourself too much, because it
Mm.
sounds unnatural when you do that. And Nate is a prime example for that, where he can really, play all around the beat. And but like you said, drums, I think drums is the best instrument for that, and figuring that out, dividing your brain and being able to like separate rhythms um and feel it, but yeah.
But seeing Nate Wood open for Nowhere in Brooklyn a few years ago, playing bass with his left hand, drum set, seated at the drum set, and also playing keyboard while he's got everything else going. And I just thought, okay, that's something. That's something I've never witnessed before. And then I start seeing Lewis Cole doing that in a band that will remain nameless, but you get to see him going there a little bit too.
He does, yeah. It's pretty insane to
You
me.
guys are all crazy.
Yeah,
Well, we're
with
all
Nate,
crazy about music, right? I mean, it's amazing.
yeah, yeah, it's inspiring for sure. I feel very lucky. But with Nate, I will say, like, yeah, because you saw his four uh
Or
project.
limb. Yeah.
Yeah, that I saw. I want to say a brief thing about this because I saw that show a few times, and he played, I think it was New Blue a few years back, and his synthesizer in the middle of the gig just fell off and broke into a million pieces. And he just like, it was one of the most badass things I've ever seen. He just like was in the middle of, playing his song, and he's singing and playing bass, and he's playing the chords, and then all of a sudden the synth just fell off. And he just kept going and just went crazy. And it was like survival mode. Just, it was so cool to watch that. I was like, all right, like this is some other shit. I can't get with this. It's amazing. Um, yeah, pretty cool show to watch. I like when things go wrong because it's like, what's gonna happen here?
That's right. That's
Yeah,
big part of jazz. I
yeah.
asked Jack DeJohnette, what is jazz? He said, surprise.
Mm,
You know, it's it's a big part of it. I
yeah.
mean, surprise for the maker and for the listener, I think is kind of a good place to be.
Yep. Yeah. I think if you're not surprising yourself, then that's the goal to me. Surprising myself, hopefully, enough times can hear something new.
I saw a couple of really cool duets on your website, chrisfishmanmusic.com.
Hmm.
You had one duet with Flying Lotus, and I
Mm,
was hoping you could tell me a little bit about that kind of stuff
yeah.
that you get into.
Yeah. So Lotus, um, I got to start working with him in the beginning of 2020. And he sort of similar to the Pat situation, just asked me to come over and play with him. And he was putting together a band for this tour that he was setting up, where it was me and him and another keyboard player, Taylor Graves. And the three of us were kind of regularly getting together in the beginning of 2020 and just playing, where we would sort of improvise and play some of Lotus's music and sort of building this show. And then, of course, COVID hit literally like, I want to say like a month into us playing together. But right before COVID, there was this show that Leaving Records put on in a park in Highland Park. And it was just like outside. This is like literally right before day one of like shutdown. And it was just me and Lotus, and we just played and improvised for like an hour. And that was really fun. Um, and yeah, that whole year we made a lot of music together, which was really great. And I felt like I was sort of in a school with him for that time because I had just finished a record, and I was sort of feeling removed from it. And I remember going to him and telling him sort of my situation where I was kind of like, I did it in a studio. Everything was sort of trapped in this studio where I couldn't access the files and all this stuff. And he was like, man, why are you doing it that way? You got to like, you got to learn how to record and, do it yourself. And he started teaching me Ableton on Skype before Zoom even was a thing. And so he was giving me Skype lessons on Ableton, which was really cool. And then also was sort of to learn it for his show because we were using Ableton. Um, but yeah, he was just like really kind of teaching me to do it your own way, and I started getting really sort of deep into that, and yeah, and we were regularly playing, and then we started working on Yasuke, which was an anime series that came out the year later. Um,
Did you
which
do sound design for that, or were you composing for
I,
that?
I I was composing, yeah, and same with Thundercat, yeah, and I got to play on that and work on that during COVID, which was awesome because that first year was just, silent, just dead silence for, really everyone. And not playing with people was really weird. So that was a cool little moment to get into that same creative space. And yeah, really, really, really fun.
That's when I started this podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
as a response to the isolation.
Yeah.
If we can't really get together and play, what
Hmm.
would be almost as much fun as let's talk about music and concepts and what you love and what you're into and what you're trying to do and who's your people and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's just been our fourth anniversary is coming up next month.
Wow.
It's
That's
hard to
great.
believe.
Yeah. 4 years.
But that connection between musicians goes on even across, the screen and across over the phone. And I know we all just sort of came together as the best we could to survive that. Cause a lot of people, right, they forget how really scary and dark that was.
Oh, man. Yeah. A lot of my memory is weird from that time because
Hmm.
yeah, it was like watching movies all the time and, or just, yeah, time, you just wanted time to like go by fast because you're like, all right, let's get to this part now. It was just, yeah, it was crazy. Um, but I felt also very fortunate to still sort of be able to play a little bit in safe environments. And, you know, that part of music was not really, I never really done something like that yet. So, you know, doing the scoring sort of world of things, that was really fun because it was like kind of the same thing as improvising where you're responding to things, you know, but it was like visual. We get these like visual sort of sketches of stuff, and it's like, okay, the girl's crying, like what do we do here? Okay,
Mm.
let's play this. And it was really fun. um and also just a lot of musicians that are normally on the road were not, I mean, everyone wasn't on the road, so it was a cool time for everybody. There was a period of time in late August, I want to say, where people were getting together, doing like a lot of testing to make sure it was fine, and then they would get together and record. Um, and that it was just crazy. It was like, okay, all these people are here right now, and they're all able to like record. That'll probably never happen ever again because they're always on the road, you know. So that was a weird, interesting time for that too, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that period for me, like I think also just not playing with people, it was super not, that was weird. So it's like getting to do that again. I remember uh Domi and JD Beck, two of my dear friends, we were hanging out a lot during that time, and we were going to Shangri-La in Malibu, which is Rick Rubin's spot, and we were playing at this studio, and um, Skrillex was running these sessions and just bringing a ton of musicians to play. And so it was kind of like a jam session, you know, but we were just recording music. And yeah, it was a really special time for that.
That's
And
great.
yeah, so it was cool. That was finally, we're like, okay, we can kind of get outside, you know.
Well, tell me about what's going on nowadays, Kris. I know you're working with Mac DeMarco, right?
Yeah. Um, right now I am yeah, Mac DeMarco is doing 3 shows at the Greek in this month in July. And so we're just rehearsing every day. I'm playing drums in that band, and yeah, it's really fun. I mean, I grew up listening to his music, so it's really special to, we're kind of playing the whole 10 years of his discography. It's a lot of music, and um, yeah, just working on that right now. Just finished also producing a record with my friend Daryl Johns, a dear friend of mine. This record we've been working on for a really long time. And so that's finally done. Yeah, and I think pretty much for the rest of the year, I'm like using that time to just record my own stuff, um, and hopefully put something out in the middle of next year. So that's pretty much what's happening.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
Fantastic. So good to talk to you, Kris
Yeah.
Fishman.
Yeah, man. You as well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Everybody, thanks for listening. As always, happy to hear from you at bendianmusic.com. And, you can like and subscribe. If you want to hit us on Patreon, that's great too. But we're going to keep it going with all the most interesting creative people out there. And Kris Fishman is one of them. Thank you, Kris, so much.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. See you next time on the ProgCast.